And the narrative that as a whole seems to be getting pushed is that any woman who is older is jealous of younger women, is in competition with younger women. Hey guys, I'm Hannah Cox with Base Politics. Welcome back to my show, Histrionics, where every week we talk about women's issues from a centrist point of view. Don't forget, if you like these videos, you need to like, comment, and subscribe, and you can also check out others in the series. As I'm pretty sure just about everybody is aware at this point, there has been a centuries-long campaign to make women dislike and distrust older women. That effort has been particularly focused on single older women. You can hear it in terms like spinster, old maid, the way that we continue to talk about women who are single past their 30s and 40s. They're called cat ladies. People say they're miserable, they're angry, they're alone, they're bitter, they're sad. And I think it should be pretty obvious to anybody with a fully formed brain watching this conversation that there is an underlying motivation for these kinds of attacks and for these caricatures being perpetrated continuously over and over in society. And that is a simple fact that there is a concentrated demographic who have a vested interest in getting younger women to take whatever they can get as fast as they can get it. They ultimately want to scare younger women into getting married and getting married young because marriage benefits men and because women with fully formed brains and a little bit of life experience obviously are going to bypass a good number of men who are out there. And before they're 25 and they've gained some of that life experience, they might not have the wherewithal to recognize red flags that women slightly older than them could point out. And this campaign against older women gets carried out across all spectrums of the media. Obviously, you see it across various social media platforms, particularly in things like the manosphere and the red pill communities. But this is really just a new twist on a very old concept. Movies, entertainment, books, all of these things have often painted older women, particularly single older women, as shrewd, as miserly, as unhappy, as nags. And even members of the mainstream media, so-called journalists, have often piled in on this. I want to remind you of one article that ran a number of years ago in Newsweek attempting to do just that. Now, if you know anything about the editorial staff at Newsweek, I think you probably know it's an outlet you should take with a tremendous grain of salt. And this Psychology Today piece is called Revisiting the Most Infamous Scare Story About Single Women. And it's about a column Newsweek actually had to retract, although it has still not had a full mea culpa over the incident. And they note that history was made 30 years ago in June of 1986. That's when Newsweek published an infamous article that lit up the media and conversations everywhere, even before social media was there to help. It was about how single women who had reached the age of 40 were more likely to be killed by a terrorist than to ever marry. The quip made it into movies and TV shows. It got shared and analyzed and bashed over and over and over again, and is now an enduring part of our cultural history. But now Newsweek has recanted. The chances of marrying after 40 are actually much higher than the initially reported 2.6%. The author of the Psychology Today piece goes on to say, Newsweek wants to know why they were so wrong. I have a different question. Why did it matter? Even if the original statistics had been true, why should that have been a cause for trauma or hysteria? At my age, 52, the chances that I will ever be a butcher, a baker, or a candlestick maker are surely less than 2.6%. But that awareness does not send me scurrying fretfully into the offices of a therapist. The myth about low marital odds can have the power to incite panic only if it is codependent on a second myth that is even more pernicious, that life as a single person is shameful and sad. Now, as I've said on this show and will continue to say, I think that marriage is a wonderful, beautiful, amazing thing so long as you marry a person of quality. I think if you get married and you don't marry a person of quality, it is one of the worst and most devastating mistakes you can make. But while I believe that marriage is ultimately a good thing, I cannot stand the way our society demonizes those who are single. And I honestly think a lot of this is about projection and manipulation. As I've addressed on this show, women are actually far less likely to even want to remarry following a divorce or the death of a partner. On top of that, there is a growing number of women who are choosing to be single. And when they say they're choosing to be single, it's not this like red pill, I'm giving up and going home because nobody wants me. Like, no, they are actually just enjoying their lives, finding meaning elsewhere, and don't want the drama of a marriage or a man. This notion that you often hear the red pill and other demographics push, that there's all of these older women who are just regretting their life choices and they're so unhappy and they're just alone with their cats and no one's going to know that they're dead. It's going to be days and days before anybody finds their bodies. It just doesn't actually wash. That's simply not the dialogue that is happening amongst most women. And that's why I say this is projection and manipulation, because it's actually men who are afraid of ending up alone. It's actually men who don't have support systems, who don't have community outside of a romantic partnership or a family. It's actually men who probably nobody would find their bodies for several days if they don't have a spouse because they aren't involved in things around them. It's men who get more advantages out of marriage. Statistically, we see this over and over and over again. And lastly, it's mostly men who are really wanting to find relationships and not able to do so, because women simply have a greater ability to go out and find a man at random. But that is why you see many of these men try to turn these narratives against women in order to scare them and in order to shame them so that they'll have no other options other than to pick them and settle down with them.
The reason why below bare minimum low effort men love to scare us with the prospect of being alone, of being worthless, is because they are projecting their fears of being alone and worthless. They simply cannot fathom that women are choosing to be single, because a man who does not have access to women is a loser as per the rules of the games of men. They cannot understand that they are not trophies in the world of women. Do you get it now? That's why they're always projecting,
you're gonna hit the wall, you're gonna be worthless, so many bodies, you're not even a virgin.
Like, that's why, because they are projecting their fears of being worthless, of being alone. I read this TikTok, and I'll credit her here. She said that men love to scare women about hitting the wall because they're projecting their own fears of being at the wall, because men are born at the wall. Then they have to prove themselves to get out of the wall. Do you get it now? So they're always projecting their fears onto women about hitting the wall because they are at the wall. Bestie, I'm telling you, there is no wall for women. Women are desirable at any and all ages. Now you know.
Y'all, I hate to come in with harsh truths. I know people often call this out in the comments, but facts are facts. I often see people in the red pill communities trying to talk about women hitting the wall, or once you're older, you'll get less attention. I'm 36. I get as much attention as I ever have, if not more. And I feel like that's true for most of the women around me. I also have the privilege of knowing a lot of older women. As a pastor's kid, I just know a lot of people. I know a lot of people in a lot of phases of life. I intimately know them because as a pastor's family, you're often involved in their lives in a very intimate way behind the scenes. You know more about them. So I know a lot of women who are single, who are older than me. Some of them have never married. Some of them have divorced. Some of them have lost spouses. None of them are having trouble getting a man. Okay. The only reason they haven't married or haven't remarried is because they refuse to lower their standards. Okay. Their standards are pretty high and they're not willing to take anybody beneath them. They're not willing to settle because they are content and happy in their own world. And they would rather have that peace and not have it disrupted by somebody who's not of quality, who's not up to their standards. And so they choose to stay single. And even then, I watch over time, a lot of them ultimately do meet really good men down the road. My mom was in town this weekend and we were actually talking about two different women we knew, both in their 50s and 60s, who had just remarried and found amazing quality men after being single for a number of years. So this theory that they try to push that women are going to hit a certain age and then they're just washed up and worthless and nobody's going to want them, they can't get a man, it couldn't be further from the truth. Like, you have no real world experience if you're pushing this. Women can always get a man. Can they get a quality man that they actually want to give their time to? That's where they're struggling. That's where women are struggling. And that's why I want to talk about these issues on my show, because I really want to see a generation of men rising up. I really want to see men doing better. I really want to see there being a quality pool of men for women to dive into. But that is simply not what's happening right now. In response to that reality, the urge to try to demonize women, to make them scared of growing older, to try to frighten them into just taking like whatever scraps they can get that are out there, it's not working, okay? It's backfiring. Telling women that they're washed up and not worth anything past the age of 25 doesn't make them want to settle down with you. Like, why would you want to marry and procreate with somebody who has that mentality, who believes that about you? That's just somebody who wants to get kids out of somebody and I guess sex for a little bit, and then will kick them to the curb for somebody else the first chance they get. Any man who believes that should be avoided like the plague. I also think when you see men in particular coming for older women, it's often coming from a place of very intense victim mentality and grievance culture. Take this recent conversation that popped up around Pamela Anderson on Twitter. This is the original post. It was by an Anon account, of course, and it says, "This used to be the hottest woman in the world. And in it, there's a video of Pamela Anderson, who's now, I think, in either her late 50s or early 60s. She doesn't wear makeup. She's kind of given up on the whole like beauty industry. She's into aging naturally. And you guys, she is stunning for her age. Her skin is flawless. She is just absolutely beautiful. Like, women would kill to look like this at her age. So the fact that he's trying to troll her at all is just so counterintuitive and makes him look totally weird. And obviously, he lost this battle in the comments significantly, but I want to turn your attention to some of the dialogue I saw happening around this because I think it's 100% accurate. This girl, Allie, I follow, said, pay attention to how men talk about other women, especially older women. Aging is the only inevitable. If they're obsessing over how Pamela Anderson hit the wall at 56, they don't want you for life. They want you for your 20s. That's exactly right. Like, if you think she looks bad at 56, what are you going to think the average woman looks like at 56? Because she's got a whole lot more money and a whole lot more access to beauty care and products than the average woman does. And she also is just very genetically gifted from the get-go. So if you see men talking about women like this, like, those are men you don't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. The point of getting married is to find somebody you can share your life with, your whole life with, somebody that you can go through various phases of life with, somebody that you can find compatibility with, who you continue to grow with. And anybody who's entering into a marriage would hope that that person would continue to see them as valuable and beautiful throughout all of life's processes. I guess maybe I'm just a little naive in this because I cannot fathom my father or my grandfathers having this mentality towards my mom or my grandmothers. Like, those men were obsessed with those women. My dad continues to be obsessed with my mom. Like, there is nobody he thinks is more beautiful than she is. But the reason you see this kind of venom directed at older women like Pamela Anderson is because these men hate women. It really doesn't matter what age they are or what they look like. They hate women in general. And I saw this comment addressing the Pamela Anderson controversy that 100% backs me up on that. This is again from an Anon account, which is apparently the only place men are truly honest on the internet. But it says, the primary interest a man has in a woman is her fertility, which he judges by her appearance and age. I'm just going to stop you right there. That's not the primary interest most men have in women. There are plenty of men who love women who cannot conceive, who don't want to conceive, who are past the age of conceiving. This is a weird fetish, a hyper fixation that the red pill community has. It's not normal, and I don't care how much they try to act like this is just evolutionary psychology, which so funny to me. Even the evolutionary psychologists have come out and been like, hey, they're using our work, but they actually don't know how to read it, and this is not the correct interpretation. Please stop using our work. And they're still just like,
We're using science.
You're not using science. You're full of it. You don't know what you're talking about. If you do want to have kids, then yes, it's normal to look for somebody else early in life who also wants to have kids. But again, that's not the only reason that you would have an interest in a woman. Anyways, back to his diatribe. He says, all other interests are secondary to that. That's biology. Shaming living things with their biological structure is silly. Prime fertility years for women start to decline mid-20s and reach low levels mid-30s. Again, not scientific. Women can have kids well into their 40s. And now, thanks to science, it can even go past that. Anyways, he goes on to say 35 is considered a geriatric pregnancy and is known to be risky. Therefore, a man wants a woman 20s more than anything else. No, most men are not obsessed with women in their 20s. I refuse to let you think this is normal. I refuse to let you think that there isn't something creepy about this. He goes on to say the deal we used to have was if you give it to him, he takes care of you for the rest of your life. So if you give a man your 20s and you give him kids, he'll just take care of you because you're an obligation at that point. Like, that's the most transactional thing I've ever heard. It's totally normal and valid to want to have kids and to find somebody that you love and want to procreate with and to build a family together and to take care of one another and to take care of the kids together. That's normal. This transactional thing of like, I deserve a woman in her 20s who's going to give me all of these things and then I'll begrudgingly pay for her and then still do whatever I want on the side. No. That's an abuser's mentality. He goes on to say the deal we increasingly have now is she spends all of that on fun with strangers and then offers you the very little value that's left when she's ready to retire. One, that doesn't have to be the deal. You are perfectly capable of finding a woman in your 20s who's also in her 20s and getting married young. That's totally your prerogative. The fact is most men are not trying to do that. In fact, there's a lot more women trying to do that than there are men in the equivalent demographic. Secondarily, it should not bother you so greatly for the person you're with to have dated other people. And thirdly, again, if the only value you see in a woman is in her youth, you are a creep that should be avoided. More from him. He says, most men start out low value and grow over time with skill and wealth. Most women start out high value and degrade over time with age. Well-adjusted people believe that people have value at all stages of life. There are many women who are seeking to get married in their 20s who are not looking for material wealth. Are they looking for a man who has a good work ethic, who has a good job, who's proving he's going to work and keep moving up? Absolutely. And there's not enough of those. And that they won't take you when you're in your 20s because you're not wealthy. And then all of a sudden they're after you when you're in your 30s, you're making more money. Like, again, this is not what's happening in reality. And I think you need to go outside and touch grass. I don't think you actually engage in real society when you have this mentality. I think you're isolated. I think you're alone in your home. I think you're feeding into online vortexes and they are screwing your brain up. Anyways, he keeps going. It says, the deal was give your 20s to a well-behaved go-getter and stick with him through thick and thin and he'll take care of you. The deal now is my 20s are for me. Wee, fun. Also, your success is for me. When I'm done with the fun, buy me a house now that I'm 40. Fortunately, I wasn't the only person who saw this and thought it was peak insanity. Someone said, this is great and all, but who told anyone they have to date Pamela Anderson? The question wasn't, why won't men date older women? The question was, why do men have such disdain towards older women? And here's where he really admits the truth. And while I do think this is honesty, I don't think that it's valid, to be clear. He says, that's a great point. What I said was the underlying structure for what these men are doing. The men express disdain for older women because they're bitter that no one picked them when they were 26. They're lashing out. The main point of my account, the main message that I'm sending is that if you structure society in a way that causes a large enough portion of men to become bitter and resentful towards society for not giving them what they were promised, if they did what they were told, they will stop acting in a socially beneficial manner. Let me just pause him there. You are not owed a woman. You are not owed a relationship. There are plenty of women out there who are also doing what they were told in order to try to gain a husband. They're going to church. They're looking after their appearances. They are getting an education. They're working hard at their job. They're also trying to establish hobbies. They're going to therapy. I see so many more women doing what they were told, trying to jump through the hoops they feel they need to jump through to get a husband than I ever see men doing. Men will sit here and complain about how they aren't getting picked and how the women don't want them when they're younger. And I don't actually see them trying to do anything about that. I don't see them trying to better themselves. I don't see them working on their appearance. I don't see them getting involved in their community. I don't see them trying to become more educated, trying to work up in the workforce, trying to make more money. Be proactive. But be proactive for you, okay? And I say this to both genders. I really don't like this narrative of like, you have to accomplish this and this and this, and once you get to this pinnacle, then you deserve a spouse. It's not how it works. There's plenty of shitty people who are married. This isn't like climbing Mount Everest and you get the prize at the top. All you can do to control your romantic life is try to make yourself the best version of yourself possible. And in doing so, you most likely will not only be a more viable partner for good people, you're also more likely to encounter them because good quality people are out in the world doing stuff. They're not sitting online complaining about their lives. But ultimately, you can still do all of that and not meet the right person. A lot of it really just is luck and timing. You're not owed a person. I can't stand this like entitlement mentality. And then when they don't get it, they think they're a victim. Now, I do think for a very long time, society taught men this. And I think right now, the generations of men that we're dealing with, Gen X a little bit, but mostly millennials, Gen Z, and younger, these are the first generations of men that aren't getting the rigged society their ancestors got. Because society used to hold women hostage. They made it where you could not financially survive without a man. And thus, you had a lot of women who did have to take just absolutely anybody in order to get a house, in order to have a bank account. And when I see men bemoaning this fact, it kind of makes me laugh. Like, you literally need somebody to have a Stockholm Syndrome situation in order to want you, and you would like to go back to that? You think that's more desirable? What do you think that says about you? Yes, the playing field's even now. Women don't need you anymore, so they need to want you. So why don't you step up and become somebody people want? Instead, you see a whole bunch of these men with these victim mentalities pushing to go back in time, and ultimately threatening violence, even outright or passive aggressively, if they don't end up getting their way. Let's continue with his post. He says, when I was younger, I got laid a lot, but when I tried to start a real relationship, I got such shallow, stupid excuses. Basically, I want to have sex with more people was the usual one, as well as 2 personal shortcomings I have that are honestly not that big of a deal. I'm not perfect, but I'm not that bad either. Just by reading your post, I think I'd beg to differ. He goes on to say, I tried numerous times to keep someone from 23 to 33, and then I noticed that the now older women were more and more ready to settle, and I didn't want to because where were you when I was ready? This is the behavior of a petulant child. One, you were chasing loose women who didn't want to settle down with you. And so you were into red flags. And now you're mad at other women you're encountering later in life because you had bad taste and you had low values earlier in life and you didn't learn any better until you were in your 30s. And it seems like you didn't even learn in your 30s. Secondarily, even if you had good taste, you had good judgment and you were dating people of quality, it doesn't mean that somebody has to be on the same timeline as you when you're ready to settle down. This is what's kind of unbelievable to me. You've got these women who will stay in these long-term relationships with men for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, a decade plus. They'll have kids with them even, just waiting around for this man to finally be ready to propose and commit and get married. And then you've got men over here being like, whoop, my taxi light's on, I'm ready to get married, and nobody's coming running to my cab, and thus I get to be bitter and pissed off for the rest of eternity and hate women because nobody came when my light went on. That's not how marriage works. A lot of getting married is finding somebody who is on the same timeline as you. There's plenty of people you could probably marry and have a good life with. Ultimately, the timing of your life and the timing of other people's lives has a lot to do with who you ultimately end up with. But again, I think he's speaking to where a lot of men are at mentally with this post, so I want to continue. He goes on and says, this bitterness is causing a lot of social degradation, and it does no good to tell men, F you, shut up, and start liking how we treat you, even though it was an awful experience and you were treated like you didn't matter. Only we matter. Now go to work and pay for what's left of me. This is just not something you see out of women. A lot of women are made to feel low value in their 20s as well. A lot of women are overlooked. There are tons of women who were formerly obese, who've lost weight and are now super conventionally hot, who talk about this, who talk about how bad it feels to all of a sudden get attention, often from the same men who completely ignored them before they lost weight. But you know what I don't see them doing? Sitting in a corner and pouting like a toddler over the fact that society treated them like they had less value before they lost the weight. But that's what men do, right? Before they're as attractive, or before they've started earning money, or before they've proven themselves in some way, they don't get as much attention and they're mad about it. They feel like that's something that's done to them. They really do have this mentality of I'm just so amazing and special and sparkling that you should just be so excited to be with me no matter what. I'm the prize. That is how they think. And honestly, I blame boy moms for this. Okay, I have a whole episode on boy moms. You created these monsters. And what's so especially funny about this mentality and this kind of behavior is if these men were to go for some of the women I just discussed, they probably would have had a better time. If they went for women who were maybe a little bit overweight, who maybe weren't conventionally attractive, then maybe they would have found people who were more than ready to give them a shot. They're bitter and angry because the women they wanted, the women they perceived as high value, didn't see them as equals. And then he goes on to say, you have to understand that keeping a certain percentage of people in stable marriages from the early 20s onward is really the only way any civilization has ever created new generations of people and kept them productive. By changing the way everything works, you've given a lot of people extended emotional difficulty that they're gonna express in one way or another. Mocking old ladies that used to be hot is one of those ways. They're basically saying, ha ha, now you have nothing, because it makes them feel better about all the time they had nothing. Is it bad behavior? Sure. Are you going to make them stop by lecturing them? Certainly not. The social changes of the last few decades broke people apart and isolated them and redistributed how much connection and attention people get. You're hearing mostly the men who are the biggest losers in that equation when you hear the bitterness, and that's a bad sign because those are men who are going to be acting more and more selfishly after being treated like they were worthless for decades. You don't want a large class of bitter, selfish men who take delight in women's misfortune, but here we are. Now, again, I think this is an honest, truthful post. I don't think all of it's valid. It's very difficult to say that these kinds of arrangements are the only way we've ever seen civilizations work out, when up until literally my lifetime, they were mandated. Okay? Like literally the year after I was born in this country, which is more advanced than many others, was the first year women could open business accounts by themselves without a male cosigner. Now, I certainly do think there's been a redistribution of who gets attention and who has power thanks to equality. This is similar to when you see slavery or Jim Crow end, right? You saw a lot of white grievance because white people up until that point in time were told, you're special and you get to be up here just by the sake of being white. And even if they were poor white, even if they didn't have a lot of standing in society, that was something they took pride in that made them feel good about themselves because at least they were above these other people. And once you had equality, that made a lot of the white people at the bottom of the socioeconomic spectrum really, really angry at Black people. They didn't want to have to compete. They wanted their social standing that they got just by sake of being white back. This is what you're seeing from these men now that we have true equality between the sexes. Even men at the bottom of the totem pole used to get to feel like they were better and they were up here because they were better than women. They were more powerful than women. They had more money than women. Now that's evening out and women are skyrocketing past men on almost every front. Those men that were always at the bottom of the male hierarchy are really bitter and angry. And that makes sense, but it shouldn't be coddled. Those men should have to work and compete and improve themselves. There's nothing to feel sorry for them about. Like, you had an entrenched system that benefited men more than women for decades and decades and decades. And now you can't compete in the less than 40 years there's been true equality? Cry me a river. Like, I just really don't have a lot of sympathy for people in that mentality. I do want to help men. I do want to see them improve. I do want to see them pull themselves up by their bootstraps. But coddling, feeling sorry for them, joining them in these little pity parties, that's not what they need. Additionally, this perception that so many of them have that women are just screwing around until they're 30, it doesn't wash. I addressed this a little bit last week when I talked about the long-term girlfriend phenomenon. But I'm telling you across the board, there are so many women who are actively trying to settle down and get married in their 20s and early 30s. And not just trying, it's something that I think is mentally heavy for them. They feel a social stigma even to this day. It's something that a lot of women are having a very hard time coping with. They are actively trying to find good men and they simply cannot. And this particular phenomenon makes me think of a snippet of a speech titled "We Should All Be Feminists" that Beyonce actually included in her song Flawless. It's by a Nigerian author whose name I'm going to do my best to pronounce. I believe it's Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie.
Because I am female, I'm expected to aspire to marriage. I'm expected to make my life choices, always keeping in mind that marriage is the most important. Now, marriage can be a good thing. It can be a source of joy and love and mutual support. But why do we teach girls to aspire to marriage and we don't teach boys the same? We raise girls to see each other as competitors, not for jobs or for accomplishments, which I think can be a good thing, but for the attention of men. We teach girls that they cannot be sexual beings in the way that boys are. Feminist, a person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes.
I heard that song/snippet of that speech years ago, and it's always stuck with me because it's 100% true. Our society continues to push marriage on women so heavily, but we do nothing of the same to men. And if you think that marriage is actually a really good thing, as I do, that doesn't make any sense. It's actually men that you should be fear-mongering and pressuring to commit and get married younger. It's actually men who mostly make these decisions, right? To this day, it's usually men who propose. It's usually women who are waiting around on men to move the relationship forward. So it's men who should have the social stigma of being unmarried later in life. It's men who we should be waxing poetic to about how long they have to have kids with the person that they love and being old fathers and what that's going to look like for them, but you just simply don't hear that dialogue, especially from other men. And furthermore, if it's men who are mostly finding that they do not possess the qualities that are attractive to women, why are we not pressuring men to improve instead of shaming women into accepting less? And within this conversation, I've really seen the hatred towards older women rev up in recent years. It's not only directed at women who are older and single now, it's really just across the board. Any woman who's a little bit older is getting the ire of these people. And the narrative that as a whole seems to be getting pushed is that any woman who is older is jealous of younger women, is in competition with younger women. They'll say they're giving them bad advice because they also want them to be unhappy and miserable. And apparently this is just like a whole concerted agenda older women have and are waging against younger women. I want you to watch one particularly unhinged video I saw on TikTok over the past couple of days where a woman is making this exact claim.
These older women are really out here in competition with the younger generation. I'm sorry, but it has to be said. These older women who are in their 40s, 50s, even 60s want to be seen so bad and want attention that they're in competition with these younger girls. These women wasted their years, wasted their youth, and are doing any and everything to be seen. And they're not teaching the young girls. So instead of teaching the young girls to do better, you're trying to compete with her. You're in denial that you're getting older. You're doing things with your body, thriving for attention, over-sexualizing yourself at that age, all because you don't want to accept the fact that you mess up your life. They don't have husbands, which they really wanted. They're realizing that, oh wow, I'm at an age where nobody's checking for me. The men are not checking for me at 50, 60 years old, unfortunately. They're looking at the younger women who do desire marriage, who do desire to have children, who are not just out here. So instead of, again, I'm going to try to find a way to be seen and encourage the young girls to do what I'm doing because I don't want them to surpass me. That's what's actually happening. These older women are sitting around telling the young girls, no, girl, live your life, do you, because you're intimidated by her. You don't want her to do better than you. You don't want her to have a chance. You want the chance because you see the men are looking at the younger girls. The men are more attractive and more desirable of the younger women. And it's sad. This is the reality of where we are. The older generation is jealous and intimidated and in competition with the younger generation. And it's unfortunate.
When I tell you that me and like 100% of the other commenters on this video thought she was the older woman, I can't exaggerate it. I don't know how this 50-year-old looking woman is on here trying to throw shade like this, but she tried it. And it's so obviously a grift. You can hear the whole point of this towards the end, right? Don't listen to them. Listen to me. I'm here to actually help the younger women. It's all me. I'm the only one that's your friend. I'm the good guy out here. No, she's just trying to profit off of you. But since she wanted to kind of be a catty bitch, I thought I'd throw it back at her. Let's look at some of the comments. They're hilarious. One person said, as a younger woman, I've never felt that older women were in competition with me. I'm 31. My friends are 10 plus years older than me. My oldest friend is in her 60s. Sounds like some hurt. Let it go. Another said, girl, who hurt you? Another person said, I'm 44 and thought you were in my age group. Oop. Another one said, the name Just a Girl, which is her handle, for a woman that looks like she's in her 40s says it all. At the 28-year-old lady, I have never seen or felt like any woman older than me is competing with me. The older women in my circle are women to look up to. They've achieved a lot. I admire them. Another person said, I thought you were the older woman and not just a girl. I love this comment. Someone said, this is a one-way beef. Yes, this is absolutely a one-way beef, you guys. I'm going to put myself in the older woman camp, I guess. I guess I'm somewhere in the middle, but at 36, like, I feel like I've moved over to the other side. Actually, I feel like when I got married, it kind of moved me over to the other side. I told my mom, like, I went from feeling like I was a, like, kid to then I got married and I'm like, no, I'm an adult. And all of a sudden I would, like, see these young college girls out and I was like, oh, poor sweeties, I have to protect them. Someone else said, this sounds personal. Let that hurt go, beloved. And this one's like peak funny. Someone said, I'm old, LOL, 51, broke my hip running to the comments, LMO. I don't know. I mean, obviously she might be in a different community than me. If you're in the Black community and want to weigh in, maybe it's vastly different. I truly can't speak to that. But in my world, in my circle, nothing could be further from the truth than this. Now, people are not a monolith, right? Of course, there are pick-me girls. I've covered them on this show. I'm sure that this caricature comes from somewhere. I'm sure it does exist. But to pretend like it is most older women and to try to tell younger women that they should be afraid of older women and not listen to them seems intentionally manipulative. I have not seen any woman out here being like, rah, rah, being a single mom's great. You should definitely do it. I haven't seen women out here saying, never marry or get divorced. I have had the best time being divorced. Best decision ever. What they are doing, though, is warning them about some of the pitfalls that they've encountered in making these kinds of life choices. They are encouraging them not to settle due to peer pressure, not to take scraps, to watch out for man-child behavior. And they're telling them to decenter men in their lives, which again, I think is good for both genders, right? The purpose of your life should not be tied up in whether or not you find a spouse. Because again, a lot of that's luck. A lot of it's timing. A lot of it is outside of your control. You need to have goals in your life that are bigger than that. If you are one of those people who feel like you can't be happy or your life won't begin or your life doesn't have as much meaning until you meet the one, that is a recipe for you to actually be miserable because it's outside of your control, right? This is one reason I love Stoicism. It teaches you when things are in your control, go all in. Do what you can to like whip the world into shape. But a lot of things are outside of your control. And the only thing you can do then is to choose how you feel about them. You can choose how to put those things into perspective. And when it comes to whether or not you have a partner, the harsh reality is you can be just as lonely alone as you can be in a marriage. Marriage is not an end goal. Again, it's not a prize. It's not something that you like get or that's going to fill your void or that's going to make you whole. It can be a beautiful, wonderful thing. It can be a very rich part of your life, but you got to keep that in perspective, okay? And that's really the message that a lot of older women are giving to younger women. So why is it then that there is this concentration within these groups that want to make younger women distrust older women? I think it's pretty obvious, and that's that people with big sisters are more protected.
Ages of 16 to about 25.
So I'm not saying that man is a narcissist or a toxic person, but if he is, That is exactly what narcissists and toxic people do. They go after younger people a lot of times and will try to convince that younger person to not listen to their friends and family. Because he's just pretty much spent the entire video, about 3 minutes, talking about don't listen to your friends and family. If you got a good older man or a good older woman or whatever, you need to just stay by them, stick with them, because you might find the love of your life when you're 16 years old. Older manipulative people will try to convince you that you're older, that you're more mature for your age and things like that. You're a lot older. You talk a lot older. You seem a lot older than what you really are. You don't seem a lot older than you actually are. Toxic manipulative people want you to think that way so you can make your own decisions and not listen to actual people that are older than you tell you to leave that person alone. A lot of older narcissistic people target younger people because they don't have a lot of relationship experience. Hope this helps.
I love that guy's account on TikTok. If you haven't ever checked him out, he is a diagnosed narcissist, like NPD narcissist, and he talks about his experience with that. And so he often gives a lot of really good insight into ways that narcissists and manipulators and abusers think. And he's spot on right here. These older people that are trying to form relationships with younger women are doing so because they cannot connect with people in their own age range. And I hate to admit that this would have worked on me like a charm when I was younger. Because I was one of those people that really wanted to be older. I always felt like I was more mature. I loved attention from older people. Had I not had a very, very strong and present father figure, like I easily could have been got by one of these kinds of men. Because this is the perception you have when you're a younger woman, particularly when you're like 18, 19, even into college. It's very flattering for an older man to pay attention to you. It makes you feel validated. It makes you feel like you really are the older, more mature person you really feel like you are inside. It's something that your friends will often look at and be like, wow, you have this older guy paying attention to you. Your brain isn't fully formed. You don't have enough life experience to recognize that those men are losers and often pedos, or at least right on the line of being pedos. So when older women and sometimes even older men try to warn younger women about these kinds of people who will pop up in their life, it's often coming from a place of remembering how they felt when they were that age, how naive they were, how vulnerable they were, and trying to protect those younger women from these predators. When it comes to age gap relationships, they are less likely to work out as a whole. But I'm not necessarily opposed to them as people age. And I think as you get older and older, age gaps matter less. Like a 60-year-old woman who's married to a man in his mid-70s, that's a 15-year age difference. That's not going to be weird, and they're going to have much more in common than somebody would say when they're a 20-year-old woman dating a 35-year-old man. Once you get a little older, once you have a bit more life experience, it becomes very obvious to you that people in their 30s who are actively seeking teenagers and people in their young 20s to date and partner with, something's wrong with them. That's just not normal behavior. You don't have anything in common. You are definitely not going to be living in the same timelines. And typically those men, and sometimes women, are creeps. They cannot connect with people their own age. People their own age see their red flags from a mile away. They can't actually connect with them. They don't have much in common with people their age. They've been rejected by their own, and so they are trying to go down. That's the only hope that they have. I think as a whole, one gender stereotype that's completely wrong is that men are protectors. In my experience and just examining myself, women are the much more natural protectors. They are the nurturers. They are the mothers. They have instincts to look after those who are younger and weaker than them. And so because of that, they are constantly scanning the environment for threats.
Excuse me, what are you doing? No, I just saw you put that underneath her dress. Absolutely you did.
No, ma'am, I really wasn't.
You absolutely did.
Ma'am, I really wasn't. I promise.
Then show me your phone.
Get away from me. Yes.
No, we're going to call security.
No, I really...
You absolutely did. And you were following me over in the children's section.
Because I have a sister who's pregnant. Ma'am, I really wasn't.
You've been extremely close to me this whole time. Please show me your phone.
No.
I really don't mean
Let's get
to.
security. Because this is absolutely wrong.
I really don't mean to.
No, you obviously did.
No, ma'am, please.
With anything.
Ma'am, I'm
You
not.
can say ma'am all you want, but we will let them decide.
I really promise I wasn't
No.
trying to do anything inappropriate.
Uh-uh.
I wasn't. I really wasn't. I'm not like that.
Obviously you are. I literally have it on video.
But ma'am, I'm not. I really am not. Like, I know it might have seemed that way in like the video.
No,
like, I
no.
was
It's
just...
okay, listen to me.
Yes, ma'am.
We're going to wait for them to get here.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Like, I was just trying to look
Nope.
at the books.
No.
I was really just trying
No.
to look at books. I
No. Like, you can stop.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You were so suspicious following me all around the store. I knew you were up to no good.
Hey, how's everything going here?
No, I have video of him sticking his phone underneath this lady's dress as she had bent over, videotaping her. And he followed me all around the store.
Okay. So...
We need to
like
get police.
Okay, if you can go ahead and call them also.
I love how she stood on business. Her voice did not shake once. I've seen women do this in the wild. I, in fact, myself have almost done it. There's so many times I've been like on a plane or in a restaurant. I've seen just a man totally harassing a younger woman. She's obviously very uncomfortable, but she doesn't really have the spine to stand up for herself, because a lot of women aren't taught to do that. I've seen women come up and pretend to be family members. I've seen women just come up and tell men to leave a woman alone. Like, women are amazing in this way. Older women at large are in lockstep trying to protect and shepherd younger women. They aren't jealous of them. They certainly aren't competing for your dusty ass if you're hitting on them. Many of us actually pity younger women because we remember being a younger woman. It's tough. It's hard. There is a drive to protect younger women from many of the things we had to go through. And the fact is, the internet is making that job, that sense of duty, easier than ever. It is quite simply easier to manipulate people who are under age 25. I say this a lot on my show. I don't know if I've ever actually broken down the science for you, so I want to bring it to you right now. This is science I discovered when I was working in criminal justice reform, because we tend to see that violence pretty much goes away after the age of 25. And that's because the components of your brain that regulate things like risk and reward, they aren't fully formed until you're age 25. So you're a lot easier to take advantage of. You are much more likely to make bad decisions. That not only contributes to crime, it contributes a lot to abuse.
Your prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed until your mid-20s, but what does that actually mean? Does it mean bigger, more brain cells? What are we talking about here? You're asking the right girl, because I'm Rachel and I am a neuroscientist. The vast majority of brain cells that you'll ever have in your life, you already have when you're born. So it's not that. To understand what it means for the prefrontal cortex to be matured, let's look at brain development a little bit. So you're born, you have most of the brain cells that you'll ever have, and then you go through a period of time where you're making tons of connections between those brain cells. That's important because brain cells don't really do very much all by themselves. They're complicated little machines that are pretty useless all by themselves. Then we go through critical stages in childhood and adolescence where we undergo synaptic pruning. Basically, your brain takes a good hard look at which connections are super important and which we're not really using very much. Those connections that we're not really using very much get thrown in the trash or pruned away, and the ones we really need get strengthened up so they can be more efficient. It's this process of synaptic pruning that doesn't really fully do its thing until our mid-20s in the prefrontal cortex. Now, that's important because the prefrontal cortex is responsible for some very precise higher order cognitive functions like making decisions, planning, impulse control, empathy, moral judgments. And so having that part of the brain not develop until later into adulthood gives us the flexibility to figure out which decisions, judgments, etc. are appropriate for our culture and context.
The internet is a phenomenal organizing tool, and women are the best at organizing, okay? That is just something we've got on lock. And so women are using the internet to share information. They're using it to offer support and empathy and encouragement for other women. And that in and of itself poses a very, very big threat to men with bad intentions, and I guess to the few grifter women who are also trying to profit off of the red pill community. But I want to roll you a few examples of the kinds of information older women are actually sharing online, the kinds of discussions that they're fostering.
You don't chase any man, baby. Unless he done took your purse, then you try to chase him to get your purse back. But if he ain't steal nothing, leave him. He's the chaser, baby.
I can't believe how many women are selling their homes to get rid of their boyfriends. A video I made a week ago is peppered with comments like this. In my video, I said, look, I regretted not getting a lease agreement from a man who I allowed to move into my home. I call it sudden onset memory loss, when they totally space that rent is due every month. One woman said she sold the house and he was still on the couch when it was moving day. Another said she paid him to get out. Michelle said he suddenly wanted to take out an insurance policy on her and asked this not so subtle question about what it would happen to her home in the event of her death. I like this solution. Just tell him you're going to get another place together. But the best idea is that he move in there first and then change the locks and break up with them. It can sound like a really romantic idea to move in together until, ladies, you end up carrying the financial load. Please save this video, go back and watch the other video I posted, and spend time reading through the comments. Don't repeat our mistakes.
To my younger ladies out there, and I'm saying this as somebody who also started having children in my 20s, stop listening to these ladies talking about they glad they got their kids out the way so that they could basically relive their 20s over when they're in their late 30s and in their 40s. Because most of these women didn't care about giving their kids a good life. They talking about, oh, have your kids in your 20s so you could travel when you're in your 30s and 40s. Don't you think you should have been traveling with your kids? Don't you think you should have been focused on the life and experience that you was giving your kids? And I'm not saying this is all women, but I do notice a lot of women who say this don't care about the fact that their kid was getting dragged while they was learning how to be an adult and learning about themselves and becoming a mature person. And they often ignore how their kid felt through that process. Everybody can choose their own path, but I will say if you're in your late teens, early 20s, use that time to have fun, make your mistakes, learn about life, learn about yourself, and, have fun while you don't have a mouth to feed and somebody relying on you. And this may be an unpopular opinion, but being a parent when you're a little bit more established, financially stable, and mature is a lot more fun than when you're trying to figure out how to get by. And I'm not saying life doesn't have ups and downs, because throughout your life, you're always going to have ups and downs, mentally, financially, physically. But at least give yourself time to build up a foundation before you have them kids. Because a lot of them mamas who brag about that they got their kids out the way spent half of their life counting down till they could leave their kids home alone and relive that life that they really missed out on without them kids.
What I like about these women is that they're really not approaching anything with a one-size-fits-all mentality. Instead, they're just talking about their lived experiences, which is valuable. And listening to other people's learned experiences can help you avoid making mistakes and thus having to go through the same pain and heartbreak that they did. I honestly would have killed for access to some of this advice when I was growing up. If you watch the show, my parents have been married for 40 plus years. They have an amazing marriage. And that's the thing I've really benefited from. I've been able to watch and observe and measure the people I'm dating up to. But that being said, they also got married at 20 and 23. My mom had pretty much zero dating experience. So for me, when I was first starting to date, when I was looking around, love you, mom, but she was no help. She was no help. Even to this day, my sister and I often laugh about her advice or how she'll discuss things. Because we're just man, she has no idea what it's like out here. She really doesn't. One example, I remember when I was in college, I went to Belmont University, which is a big music school, and I had dated this one guy who was super hot, definitely the hottest guy on campus. We dated for 2 years. And then I broke it off because I just didn't really feel like I was going to marry him. And he was wanting me to move to California. I wanted to stay in Nashville. It was a whole thing. So anyways, we break up. And my family, having kind of this typical Southern mentality, is typically most people meet their spouses at college. So probably keep looking around, meet somebody else on campus. And I was in my junior year, and I just said, I don't really know if I want to do that. I think I just want to enjoy the rest of my college experience. And there's really not a lot of other men that I'd want to date here. They're pretty effeminate at this campus. And my mom did not believe me until she came to visit one week, and she attended a few classes with me, and she was looking around and she was like, why are all the men in jeans tighter than mine? I was like, yeah, that's what I'm working with here. Okay. That's my dating pool. So just one example of many of how the times had massively changed by the time I was dating compared to when my mom was dating. And so I didn't have that. I didn't have a big sister that I could look to. And so I really felt like I was out on my own, paving my own path. And because of that, I think I made a lot of missteps that could have been avoided had I had TikTok, had I had the ability to simply listen to women who are older than me. And fortunately, I am somebody who's pretty strong-minded, and so I didn't succumb to a lot of the peer pressure to marry young. I knew right away I didn't want kids, but I think there are a lot of women who do fall into these traps and who make life-changing decisions that they have to live with forevermore at a very young age, often again before their brains are fully formed, and then they live to regret it. So the ability to access these kinds of personal stories, the ability to hear from other people, to walk in their shoes a bit, it really can go a long way in helping other women to make up their own minds, to make better decisions, and again, to avoid bad people. You ultimately become who you are around. That's one reason mentorship is so important. You're simply not going to advance all that much if you are only around people who are like you, if you are the smartest person in the room, if you're not listening to people who have already arrived at where you ultimately want to go.
If you're the smartest person in the room, then you are in a coffin. You're not in a room. And I think what I'm saying about getting out of control regular is that you need to listen to people that are smarter than you, that have figured something out better than you, that have a knowledge beyond you and I, and it makes you feel uncomfortable because when you think you know all there is to know about that, or you think you're an expert, then you hear someone else speak and it's like, whoa, I've never thought of that. That's good for us. And growing people regularly get out of control, knowing we do not grow where we control everything.
And we talk about this a lot, I think, when it comes to business. We don't talk about it enough when it pertains to relationships. A lot of people are simply not getting very good advice or training from their parents when it comes to relationships and how they approach them. And one reason for that is that fewer and fewer people are even growing up in homes with marriages around them to observe. According to a 2020 Pew Research study, only 69% of millennials live with two married parents at a similar age. That's lower than the percentage of Gen Xers and Boomers who live with married parents at the same ages, 72% and 86% respectively. And that's kind of crazy to me. Like I've said over and over, I don't have divorce in my family. Everybody is married, everybody stays married. It is a marriage-centric family. But when my husband and I were starting to talk about engagement and getting married, it was something that he had not had. He actually only had one relationship in his immediate family that had been long-lasting that he could look to, which was his grandparents. And that's really tough for a lot of people because they feel like they don't have examples to look to. It makes them doubt their own abilities in relationships. It means they don't have as many examples to rely on how to have a healthy relationship. And I think that in and of itself is one reason we see such an overcorrection often happening and coming out of things like the trad wife community and like Christian coupling. They grew up in divorce, they grew up in dysfunction, and so they want to run over here to another extreme that they feel like would right the ship. And I also think it's one of the reasons we see some very strong adverse opinions about the other gender from different online populations. Obviously, the red pill has a strong distaste for most women, and a lot of fourth wave feminists have a strong distaste for men. And I just don't really know how that's possible if you grew up with a quality mother and father. If I want to be an astronaut, I'm going to try to seek out other astronauts and learn from them. If I want to be a millionaire, I'm going to try to obtain financial advice from other millionaires. And if I want to be in a happy, healthy marriage, I'm going to seek out other people in happy, healthy marriages and try to learn from them. Furthermore, if I want to avoid abuse or divorce or single parenthood, I'm going to listen to people who have unfortunately had to go through that and learn about the pitfalls that they encountered so that I too can look out for them and avoid them. But apparently it seems I'm not the norm.
Do you want to know why it's mostly single women that give advice on this app? I heard a girl asking, like, why isn't it that the married women are the ones giving dating advice? Why is it single women? Well, every time a married woman shares a good positive story about her husband or her married life, people jump in the comments and wish the worst on her. They say that she's bragging and that you should never brag on your man. And oh my God, one day he's going to embarrass you. We're not bragging. We're actually living our happily married lives. And sometimes when we share, if we share anything personal about our situation, people take it the wrong way. So I give general dating advice here on my channel, but I would love to give more personal, more detailed advice, but I can't really do that unless I talk about my personal situation. And every time I do, on the rare occasion, people are like just wishing and waiting for the other shoe to drop in my life. So therefore I kind of scale back and I talk very generally, but I am going to share some personal stories about me and my life and how I kind of landed in this place. Why? Not because I want to brag, but because I do believe that success can be replicated, that we can learn from each other. Like, I can't be the only one who found love later in life, got married at 38, had my son at 39, became a homeowner at 40. I am the president of the Late Bloomers Club, and I want to give hope to not just the late bloomers, even women in their 20s too. Maybe I can save the women in her 20s some time so that way she doesn't have to make all of the same mistakes I did. I am not a dating expert. I'm just someone who got it wrong time and time and time again. And when I finally got it right, things went smoothly for me. So maybe I can spare you guys from making a lot of the stupid mistakes that I did. Anyway, stay tuned to my channel. Those videos will be dropping soon. And don't discredit the advice that single women on this app give, because you need to learn some things from a woman who's still in the dating game. They have value too. I'll see you in my next video.
When I saw her video, I did think it was kind of striking because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that, yes, there's a lot of valuable information from other older women out there on the internet, but a lot of it's coming from single women or it's coming from women who have divorced. Most of it's not coming from women who are married. And like I said, I think it's valuable to listen to both camps. But obviously, if you want to have a happy, healthy marriage, you need to be surrounded by other people who have happy, healthy marriages. You need that kind of mentorship and advice and just accountability even. Misery loves company, and too often people do not want to hear from people who have figured it out or have everything going on. One of the comments says, as a woman that wants to be a wife, I would rather hear more from married women, honestly. And the original poster said, I totally get that. I leaned into advice from married women too when I started dating intentionally as well. It just made sense. Another person said, they always think we are lying or settling. And the original poster said this, it's just so sad. Some of us really are happy though. Another commenter said, the way people are dodging marriage now, I just keep my little happy marriage private because I love it here. Another person agreed and said, I'd be keeping my happy married business to myself. This is a mentality that Americans have to work on across the board. I'm honestly not familiar enough with other cultures to know if this is something that happens elsewhere, but I think it is so pervasive here. Americans cannot stand to see somebody win for long. They love to see somebody reach the top, right? They love that like pinnacle, that moment where you're on top. But then if you stay there, they want to knock you off so badly. They can't stand it. It drives them mad. It's like they can't stand to see somebody else be too successful or have too happy of a life. And I think that comes from a place of wanting to feel like your misfortunes or things that are going wrong in your life aren't your fault, right? But if somebody else comes alongside and they manage to overcome those kinds of obstacles, they manage to keep going, they manage to keep being happy, to keep winning, that no longer lets you sit in your victim mentality so comfortably. And I think a lot of people would rather feel miserable than get up and do something about their lives. Unfortunately, I feel like increasingly that's what we're seeing happen in the attitudes towards dating and finding marriage, both from far left feminists and also from the red pill community and the alt-right. Instead, we need to want to see people win. We want people to be happy. We want people to get married. That's not only good for people at an individual level, it's good for society. It's good for our communities. You're not in a finite fixed pie. That's true in economics, right? I often say this when we talk about capitalism. People often act like there's this fixed pie, and if somebody has so much money, then like that's the reason other people don't have as much money. And it's like, it's not how money works. It's not how it goes. Same thing with dating though. Somebody being happy, somebody figuring it out, that doesn't make you less capable of it. Doesn't mean your odds are any lower. For quite a while now, my husband and I have talked about and even laughed about the differences in our algorithms. And we firmly believe that there is a massive social media plot to turn the genders on one another. And it is not just TikTok, it is across the board. When I look at, say, his Instagram Reels feed and compare it to mine is mostly women, some men, but mostly women, talking about relationship issues from their point of view, often talking about ways they've been wronged by men, about the trouble they're having in the dating world. And then I go to his algorithm and it's the exact opposite. It's all like women are all cheaters and they're gold diggers, they're users. Unfortunately, we're both very self-aware people. We're very cognizant of how algorithms work. But I think for most people, it would be pretty easy to get pulled into these anti-male or anti-female agendas. For whatever reason, the internet is absolutely trying to turn men and women against each other. I don't know if it's just because it's profitable. You know, these companies have an interest in showing you content that you like and you relate to and that you'll want to watch more of because they want to retain you so that they make more money. I don't know if it's political. Obviously, there are political interests that benefit from men and women being at war. There's any number of reasons for why this is happening. But what's important to know is that it is happening so that you can be on guard against it. But on top of that more recent situation, I think the world has always been trying to turn women against other women. And it's really important that you don't fall for it. All right, guys, that's a wrap. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Leave me a like and a comment. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next week. If you like this show, don't forget to check out others in the series Histrionics here. And you can watch my other weekly show, the Base Politics Podcast, here.